All right, got the, very good, Ivan, I can see you, that's good. I've got 3 cameras going now. Somebody should take a picture of this setup. Nina, you should take a picture of this setup. This is nuts. I got the laptop and over it, 2 phones, one for Facebook, one for YouTube. Okay, how do you turn on your camera? Let me see if I can turn it on for you. There you go. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Facebook is starting to come in. Oh, wow, James, you got a beard. Nice to see you. Okay, friends. So we're doing something a little bit different. If somebody would like to have their camera turned on and be part of the virtual classroom so that I can see you as I teach, there's a link in the header on the Facebook so that you can actually join the Zoom room. Okay, so I'm sorry I don't have it in the YouTube description right now, but if you're on Facebook, whether in the forum or in the just on the page, our live show on the page, there's a link there and you could try joining the Zoom room so that I can see you as I teach. Adrian Smith is in the house from Columbia Falls, Montana. Very good, Adrian. You get it. When you guys comment, signal to Facebook that something of value is happening here. That's very important. Hit those love buttons, hit those like buttons. You know, if I say something that you like during the show, hit that love button, hit it over and over again. It's like applause. You can keep hitting it a whole bunch of times. Send up a whole bunch of those thumbs ups and hearts. And again, the more reactions we get, the more people will find this show in their news feed. Joe Branson is in from the Inland Empire. Pauline in from Arkansas. Wonderful to see you guys. I know Ivan, he's here in the Zoom room. He's in Vegas, right, Ivan? And I know that James is in Indianapolis. Great to see you guys. Dennis is in from Maryland. Ian says howdy from Phoenix. Great to see you guys. We are learning together. We're holding by page 19 of Tractate Shabbos, the second tractate in the Talmud. We're still in chapter 1, and today we'll finish up the 5th Mishnah. This Mishnah has been about activities that we don't want to begin just before Shabbat comes in, Friday evening, even though these activities because these activities will continue on sort of autopilot during Shabbos. The question came up, can we start those activities before Shabbat begins? We would not be doing a prohibited labor. We're just going to be resting on Shabbat. But the question is, since labor is being done that we initiated before Shabbat, are we responsible for that labor? And does that make us liable for violating Shabbat? And in most cases, the answer is no, we're not liable, and we can sort of get these activities going per the opinion of Beis Hillel. So let's continue with that. One of the questions that came up yesterday was, may we sell an item to a non-Jew on the eve of Shabbos? Right? He can buy the thing certainly, and then a Jew does not have to keep Shabbos. Non-Jew is not obligated to keep Shabbos. So he can carry in and out from a private domain to a public domain. He can carry more than 4 cubits in the public domain. All of that is permitted to the non-Jew. The question is, does the Jew who sells such an item, create forbidden labor? Is he participating in the creation of forbidden labor? And the answer is, you can sell an item just before Shabbat comes in. You just have to have enough time before Shabbat starts so that the non-Jew can carry the item out of your house, so that you're not going to be responsible for that item being carried from the public domain, from the private domain into the public domain after Shabbat begins. And this actually led to a related question of may a Jew sell chametz? Okay, so this is leavened products, specifically bread. I mean, there's other leavened products, but what we're really thinking about here as a good example of it is bread, right? So a Jew is not permitted to have bread in his house during Passover. This is coming right up. Jews around the world are thinking about this. And as a matter of fact, lots of Jews who had plans this year to go to a Passover program, spend a nice, 9-10 days in a beautiful place. Sorry, Dad, can't take your call now. To spend their time. Oh, I don't know what just happened over there. Can this thing keep going? Sorry, back to meeting. Okay. People were going to go to these Passover programs. And the nice thing about going to a Passover program beyond being in a resort is that you don't have to do the whole Passover cleaning because your residents during Passover won't be at home. So you don't have to remove all the leavened products from your home. Well, everybody who had that as a plan, so that plan has been scrapped. And so there's a lot of folks who weren't expecting to clean out their homes for Passover this year are now finding themselves in that position. So one question that comes up is, first of all, can you sell the leavened products that are in your possession? They still have to be out of your house. But can you sell leavened products that are in your possession to a non-Jew, and then you buy them back after Passover, and this way you don't have to burn everything or throw away all these things. And there is a mechanism by which we can do that. That is an accepted practice now. In fact, many rabbis take care of those arrangements for the people in their community. So you can sort of imagine that, there's a bunch of, cereal, bread, cookies, all kinds of stuff that are considered leavened products that cannot be in your house during Passover. In Passover, the only bread you can have in your house is matzah, which is unleavened bread, right? And then there are products that resemble, cookies and crackers and cereals and other things that we eat during the year, but which are made with matzah meal rather than flour and any kind of leavening. And so all the leavened products got to go out of the house. Some people will store it somewhere, completely out of the way, not in the main house, arrange for a sale to a non-Jew so that it's not in their possession, and then they'll buy back after Passover. And the question that comes up is, well, how long before Passover do you have to do that? The students of Shammai, the followers of Shammai, base Shammai, had the opinion that you actually have to do that sale so that there's technically enough time that everything that you sell to the non-Jew could be consumed before Passover begins. But Beis Hillel, kind of analogously to the same kind of leniency that Beis Hillel have about selling something to a non-Jew before Shabbat begins, or allowing non-Jews to do work on their own schedule, but for our benefit during Shabbat, similar leniency, Beis Hillel permit that, and they permit the sale of leavened items that should not be in the home during Passover are permitted to be sold to the non-Jew. This is killing me. That's permitted to be sold to the non-Jew even up until right before Passover begins. And then we have a kind of related question. So it's if you, for instance, we also had the question of, can you hand clothes to the launderer, the non-Jewish launderer, and knowing that he's going to do laundry during Shabbat for your benefit? And the answer is, if you're asking him to do the laundry because you need it, during Shabbat or right after Shabbat, so then no, you can't do that. But if you have a long-standing relationship, or it doesn't have to be a long-standing relationship, but you have an arrangement, right, with the person who's going to do the laundry, that this is the amount of clothes that I need washed. Here, you take them and then bring them back when they're clean. And so the non-Jew who's doing that wash, the specialist, as it were, it's now up to him when he wants to wash the clothes. It's for his convenience, not yours. You haven't asked him to do it on Shabbat. If he chooses to do it on Shabbat, that's just a benefit for him, that he can schedule his work as he sees fit, since he's not obligated to keep Shabbat. What about putting a bone from your dinner table, assuming this is safe to do, or just a piece of meat, right? Or like on a bone. It doesn't have to be on a bone, but the point is a piece of meat, giving it to a dog on Shabbat, where you have reason to suspect that this is a jumpy dog, and he may, some animals, let's say there's a couple of dogs there, and so one dog doesn't want to share his food with the other dog, and his strategy for doing that is he'll take the food and drag it to a place that's private for him, right? Birds do that all the time. I mean, that's what they do, right? To sort of remove food from the flock so that they get a chance to eat it themselves before it gets ripped out of their beak. So if you know that the dog is likely to take the food and carry it off your property and therefore out of the private domain and into the public domain, the dog is likely, right, to transfer that food which you own. It's your food, and you've given it to your dog, and you know that the dog is likely to transfer that item from the private domain to the public domain. Forgot to do this. I got 3 cameras going. Let us light up the darkness. Can you do that? Can you give food to the dog knowing he'll probably transfer it? Answer, yes. Yes, you can give food to the dog, even though he may well take the food and walk off your property and transfer from private domain to public domain. Why? Why is that permitted? Because the dog has an independent mind, right? It's a simple mind, but that is a soul. Dogs have souls, right? It's a much lower level soul than a human, but he is a being who has his own independence. He makes his own choices, right? The dog can eat the food where he is or choose to take it into the next domain. And so you're not responsible for the dog transferring that item off your property. And some say that this is particularly allowed in the case of dogs. Let me read this. Some say that one may give food even to a dog that does not belong to the homeowner, as it already stated. Now you know that dog, right, for sure, if it's not your dog and you give it food, it's going to carry it off your property. It's not a maybe, it's like a probably, right? But you can still do it. And the sages said that this is a reward for the verse in Exodus chapter 11, verse 7, no dog shall wet its tongue, right? So this is at the time that the children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt, and the plagues were coming, right? The 10 plagues, and the final plague was the death of the firstborn. And then it was told to Moses on behalf of the people that, this plague will not touch the Jews, right? Why? Because we marked our homes. We put the blood of the Passover lamb on the doorposts of our home, and the angel of death passed over our homes. That's why it's called Passover. And pursuant to that, the line was added. It was unnecessary, right? It's enough to say the angel of death will pass over your homes. But in addition, God says, and no dog shall wet its tongue, right? Not even the dogs will look at the Jews with anything like anger or disapproval. They're not even going to threaten us, right? The dogs will look at the Jews as, okay, these people are receiving miracles from God. They're on their way out of slavery. And even the dogs didn't look at them, didn't even cross their eyes at us, right? So because the dogs understood that the Jews are on their way out, and we will not even bark at them, we will not even wet our tongue, let alone bark at them. So the dogs receive an eternal reward that they can always get food, even on Shabbos, from a Jew. Okay. Pursuant to the same idea, question, may we give letters to a mail carrier right before Shabbat? And it's the same answer. If you go talk to a mail carrier and say, please deliver this letter for me to such and such a place, and I'll pay you such and such a price right before Shabbat. So no, because now he's your agent to do something that you could not do on Shabbat. But if you're just using the U.S. Postal Service, right, and the price was negotiated in advance, meaning we all pay the same, the price has been set by the U.S. Postal Service or UPS or any carrier. We're not negotiating for a special deal for them to carry our particular item that's going to happen on Shabbat. So then it's okay. You can mail a letter, even late Friday afternoon, knowing that the U.S. Postal Service is going to be doing its work, moving it from one place to another during Shabbat, but that's a convenience to the Postal Service, not to you. They would just do their work anyway, receiving the price that's already been negotiated for you, for the Jews, and for all members of the population. So it's no special mission that they're doing for you, and therefore they're not causing you to violate Shabbos. May we set sail on a voyage right before Shabbat begins. Right, so this is tricky. I mean, if we're going to be on that ship, so then we're going to be traveling on Shabbos, right? We're moving through the public space. Can we do that? Answer, yes, we can do that, because when you're on a ship at sea, that's considered your residence, right? And you're going to stay in your residence. You're not going to go off the ship on Shabbat. Nevertheless, our sages decreed that you should try to avoid starting a voyage at sea less than 3 days before Shabbat. Now, this is not a strict liability. It's not because you're violating Shabbat by being on that ship during Shabbos. You can be on a ship during Shabbos. And if you're going on that voyage for the purpose of doing a mitzvah, you're going to bring charity to people who need it. You're going to bring food to people who need it. You're going to bring tefillin to someone who needs it. Any kind of a mitzvah journey that you're on, so then you can get on the ship even right before Shabbat begins. So why is that you try not to get onto a ship less than 3 days before? Well, interesting, because there's two things that might come up, and we try to avoid those things, right? So the idea is that when you get on a ship to go to sea, and now imagine this is in the ancient world, right? If they got on a ship, right, in Akko, right, the port of Akko, or near Haifa, whatever it was called at that time, to get on a ship to cross the Mediterranean, 2,000 years ago, like, there was always danger when you get on a boat. It was not normal. It was not average. It was not like getting on a bus, not even like getting on a plane. There was always a chance that you could end up in danger. And since you might end up in danger on Shabbos, you might have to violate Shabbos. It's not really violating it. Like, if you're in a time of danger, you do whatever you need to do. But since you could schedule your trip so you're less likely to be on that ship during Shabbos, so you should do that, just because dangerous situations are so common and they might result in breaking rules of Shabbos. So let's try not to be on that ship during Shabbos. Others say the reason you don't want to get on the ship less than 3 days before Shabbat begins is because most people, when they get on a ship, for the first few days, they get seasick, or it's very possible that you'll get seasick. And if you're seasick during Shabbat, so you're not going to have an oneg Shabbos. You're not going to get the joy of Shabbos, the pleasure of Shabbos. So try to avoid that by getting on the boat at least 3 days before Shabbat begins, so that you'll have time to get accustomed to the motion of the boat, and you'll be able to enjoy your Shabbos when it comes around. But like I said, for the sake of a mitzvah, you can get on that ship even on late Friday afternoon. Got it? Interesting. So some sages said that when you get on a ship and you know you're going to be on that ship during Shabbos, you should go up to the captain, if it's captained by a non-Jew, and say to the captain, could you stop the boat? Could you agree to stop the boat on Shabbos so that we won't be in motion? You do not expect the captain to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll stop the boat. Of course he's not going to stop the boat. The boat's got to go where the boat's got to go. That there's a Jew on it or not a Jew on it, I mean, it's not really his problem. You pay your ticket, very nice. We'll try to accommodate you as best as we can, but we're not going to stop the boat for you on Shabbat. Nevertheless, one should ask, why? Because we don't want the non-Jews to think that Jews don't care about the sanctity of Shabbos. Isn't that interesting? The sages want us to share with our non-Jewish neighbors and community members and people we come into contact with that we are Jewish, and that we care about Jewish observance, lest they think that we don't care about Jewish observance, right? A Jew who's visibly a Jew and violating the precepts of his own faith in public in front of people who are outside the faith makes the faith look bad, right? It's a Hilul Hashem. In other words, it disgraces God's name, because the Jews, who are supposed to be people who love God and care about God and are awed by God, if they, in a public place, don't make an effort to be observant, so then it shames God, right? By shaming the Jewish people. So it's interesting. Like, it's a sort of thing where you can imagine you're going to a hotel and you're not going to be able to do certain things on Shabbos, and you might say, you know, I'm an observant Jew, I'm not going to be able to use the electric key. You know, if you're using those card keys to get into your room, that they make a light up on the doorknob, an electric mechanism undo the thing. So if you check in with the front desk and say, I'm going to have an issue with that, do you have a metal key, a regular key? Will there be someone around who could possibly help me get in my room? And we might think, oh God, that's so embarrassing, it's so awkward. I can imagine, like, my kids would hate that. But actually, that's a beautiful thing to do, and to let people know, okay, so, you know, I have some challenges because I'm an observant Jew. You know, can you accommodate me? Can you help me? Even if they can't help you, the fact that you've let it be known that this matters to you and that you care is a positive. So that's kind of nice. Also, we should not begin a siege of our enemies less than 3 days before Shabbat begins, right? Because if you're laying siege to your enemy, right? So you can imagine this. This is like in ancient times. So the Israeli army has an enemy, and you need to besiege their town because you're gonna take over that town. That's gonna be the end of those people being in control of that town. So you're at war, and you're going to besiege the enemy in that town. So you shouldn't start that siege less than 3 days before Shabbos. Why? Because when you're in a siege, there's going to be dangerous situations, and you might come to violate Shabbos. But if you already began that siege because it was necessary because of the war, we do not relent from the siege on Shabbat. Because if the war was a justified war, okay, so then you don't, take a risk of losing the war by setting Shabbat aside. You don't do that, right? In order to save the people, you make war on Shabbos as needed. We learn also that in the house of Rabban Gamliel, so Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi of the people, the head of the Sanhedrin, and a descendant, I'm pretty sure, of King David. And in the house of Rabban Gamliel, they would give their white clothes to the non-Jewish launderer to clean 3 days before Shabbat began, but their dyed clothes, colorful clothes, could be given over even closer to Shabbos. Why? They were being extra stringent. We already said you can give clothes to the launderer right before Shabbat begins. But they took on this extra stringency upon themselves. And why did they make a distinction between white clothes and colorful clothes? Because in the ancient world, they didn't have bleach. So cleaning white clothes was just a lot more labor intensive, and it was certainly going to lead to labor being done later in the week and possibly on Shabbos. And from this we learn that in the time of the sages, white clothes were more difficult to launder than colored clothes, than colorfully dyed clothes, and one could expect to pay more for the washing of white clothes than colorful clothes. Abaya also says that when you give your clothing to the launderer, you should measure it. Now this is not like, obviously this shirt came back from the laundry and it was too big or too small, I'd feel it immediately. But if you can imagine that they were wearing clothing that was more like a poncho, it wouldn't be so evident just from putting it on whether its size had changed. Abaya would measure it so that he would know if the launderer had made a mistake and the garment had been stretched or had shrunk. So we learn from Abaya, we take care of our possessions, we take care of our clothes. The old saying, very familiar to everyone, waste not, want not. You want to take care of your possessions and not be wasteful that's actually a practice of the faith. And finally, we come to the question of food that was set aside not for eating on Shabbos, but for sale. So let's say that you sell food, or you're a farmer, and there's some, like the eggs that this particular bunch of chickens are laying, they're for selling, right? It's your business to sell the eggs that those chickens lay. Can you eat those eggs on Shabbos, right? Things that you sell that are part of your business shouldn't be part of your eating and your home life, right, on Shabbat. So there's a disagreement about this that goes back to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda would prohibit things that are set aside from use for Shabbos to be used on Shabbos, and Rabbi Shimon would permit, okay, because the fact is it's food. Food is food. If you can use it. You can use it if it's ready to eat. Or this also counts on holidays where food preparation is allowed, but work is not. The difference between holidays and Shabbat, the same kinds of work are all prohibited except food preparation, which you can do on a holiday. So these eggs that were set aside for sale, they were part of your business. Could you cook them on a holiday? Rabbi Yehuda said no. Rabbi Shimon said yes. In the exile community of the Talmudic times, which is in Babylonia, which is part of the Persian Empire, so in Bavel. So you had the sort of primary two leaders in that community were Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel disagreed with each other along the same lines that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon had disagreed. So Rav held that these items which were set aside and not meant to be eaten, they were for your business, should not be eaten on Shabbos or used on the holiday. And Shmuel would permit them, okay? Now what was interesting was that Bavel, the Jewish community in Bavel, was a little bit divided. And so you were either in the sphere of Rav's influence or in the sphere of Shmuel's influence. Rav had his yeshiva in Surah, and Shmuel had his yeshiva in Pumbedisa. Okay, so you were either in the Jewish community whose capital essentially was in Surah, or the other one in Pumbedisa. It happened that a student, who held like Shmuel, was in a town in Rav's domain, and the question came up, can this food that is set aside, can we eat it on Shabbos? And the student knew that Rav did not permit that, but the student said, but it is allowed. Of course it's allowed. Everyone knows that more people hold like Shmuel, who holds like Rabbi Shimon, that such food is permitted. But he issued that ruling in the area, right, that respected and looked up to Rav. And because of that, Rav Hamnuna excommunicated the student. Not for giving a wrong ruling, but for disrespecting Rav in Rav's area of influence. Right? So our takeaway from there is, and we'll see this many times in the Talmud, we're always looking for truth, but there's just times when there's going to be disagreements, right? There's just going to be disagreements among the sages, among the rabbis, among modern rabbis. There's going to be disagreements that don't get resolved, and we don't have a clear halacha. In those cases, the basic principle is to do like the locals, right? Hold like the people that you're among, in order to show respect to those people, and particularly to their elders, to their leaders. Okay, that is what I've got for today. And I'm available for questions if anybody on the Zoom has a question. And I welcome Daisy Castro on the Zoom, as well as Ivan Bowman and James Roth. Let me know if you do. I guess raise your hand or something, or unmute yourself and ask. Also checking the comments over here on Facebook. Do these look like questions? How about a trained dog and the owner directs the dog to carry a thing to someone outside on Shabbat? Is the owner liable? Yes. right? Because there, the dog is not exercising its independent authority, independent mind, where he decided whether to carry the thing off your property or not. That's the same as using a clapper for a light switch, or saying, "Hey Siri, turn on my lights." Right now, you're the one who caused the action that violates Shabbos. But if you set it up in advance, like you put a timer in your house, I guess an interesting question is, what if you had a dog that was trained to carry food to your neighbor, and that just, like, the training happened during the week? Could he carry that food to your neighbor on Shabbos? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Certainly you couldn't give him the food for him to carry it on Shabbos to your neighbor, because then he's your agent. But if he just comes to do it every day, maybe? I'm not sure. That question would require a little bit more analysis. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay. That's about it. All right, great. Well, I'm trying to keep these shows a little bit more efficient. I'm also thinking about doing some kind of a scheduled, I don't know, 15, 30 minutes of inspiration about the situation, right? AT Daily needs to keep going every day. This is our 80th show, by the way. Woo! It's amazing. So we're making our progress through the Talmud, and God willing, we'll keep doing that for another 2,631 days. But in terms of the situation now with the plague, I feel like maybe I'll just do a little research, prepare myself, and do a kind of scheduled talk just about that. If people think that's a good idea, let me know. And if there's something that you'd like to hear addressed, particularly about the plague, let me know. Send us a message, put it in the comments. Let me know, do you have a question about the plague, or is there some kind of inspiration in particular that would be good? I'm thinking about calling that show "Unplague Yourself." We're coming into Passover, and it's crazy. Who of us has experienced a plague in our lifetimes? And now we are, and we have a little bit more of a sense of what it's like when there's a worldwide manifestation and we're not in control. What can we learn from it? How can we grow from it? How can we make something positive come from it? How can we make something positive come from it that lasts? I think that's what interests me. But let me know if there's anything in particular you'd like me to cover in such a AT Live. All right, my friends, sending you all big love from LA. It's great to be with you. James, Ivan, great to see you. Everybody, big love. All the best.